Hey, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Episode 58, September the 23rd, 2022. As always, glad to have you aboard. Fall is officially here. Where I'm coming to you from, that means the skies are now going to be constantly gloomy, gray, and depressing for the next 6 to 7 months. So what better way to fight off depression and the doldrums that fall and eventually winter bring than to talk about rock and roll, one of the few bright and shining lights in this otherwise dismal existence that we have. Just kidding. Things aren't that bad. I wasn't kidding about the weather, though. That's what stinks. I live in an area where the cloud cover makes things perpetually gloomy outside of about 4 months of the year. Now, I've heard that I believe Pittsburgh might be considered the gloomiest city in the country because they get even more cloud cover coming off of Lake Erie. I feel bad for people in Pittsburgh then, because where I am, Upper Indiana, it's bad. We get all the gloomy cloud cover coming off of Lake Michigan. Anyway, enough with my digression about awful, depressing weather. It's time to move on to News of the World. As always, our first segment, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen. And I know last week I told you guys I don't like to talk a lot about reissues. To me, a lot of the time it's a money grab. You're just trying to soak the diehard fans for more cash, more money, for not a lot of new content. Now, last week, of course, we were talking about John Cougar Mellencamp's deluxe reissue of Scarecrow. So this week, first off, we got to talk about the reissue, the box set of Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 from Guns N' Roses. Not going to get into a lot of detail about this stuff. Again, I'm trying to stay away from talking about these cash grab box sets and reissues and expanded versions and expanded editions of classic albums that you and I already have. But the interesting thing about the Use Your Illusion box set, in addition to you will get a lot of live tracks, a couple full concerts, I believe, included with the Use Your Illusion box set, is they're making a big deal out of the fact that we're going to get a new orchestral version of November Rain. That's supposedly the big drawing point for this box set on top of the live performances. In their short career, and I say it's a short career, yes, I know they are still touring right now. I saw them last year. I reviewed them for you here on the Fortress. But in terms of studio recordings, that's what I'm getting at. It was a short career. As much as I love GNR, I've even argued I don't really know if they were supposed to be a lock for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame based on the fact they didn't really put out a lot of studio material. And that's an argument we've had before, we'll have again some other day. Nirvana is another band that comes to mind. Nobody's going to argue Appetite for Destruction was not a landmark album, was not one of the most important rock albums of all time. And I personally thought Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 was ambitious and for the most part a resounding success. One of the few times a band put out technically a double album. I know they were released separately. I believe 2 actually topped 1 in first week sales. But that's pretty much it for GNR. I'm not counting Chinese Democracy because that was basically an Axl Rose solo album. We've gotten the odd single releases here over the last couple years, but they really haven't amounted to anything in terms of new material, new albums. So when I look back at GNR, I look back at their career, and then I look back at November Rain, particularly because that's the focus of this Use Your Illusion box set. I was never a huge fan of the original. It's good, but it's bloated, overblown, overly dramatic. Something you really didn't expect from the guys that gave you Rocket Queen and Welcome to the Jungle. So the fact that we're getting a new orchestral version of November Rain does nothing for me. Maybe you guys will be excited about it. I'm not. And I'm definitely not going to go spend more money on this box set. I already own Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. That's good enough for me. We're also getting Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers live at the Fillmore, coming out November the 25th. Another huge, huge set, various formats, CD, deluxe CD, vinyl, pretty much any and every way you can imagine buying this, you'll be able to get it. This set will track the Heartbreakers' residency at the Fillmore. I looked at the set list, the box set track listing. That's the only reason I bring this up. It intrigues me because there's a lot of cover songs on there, a lot of interesting detours. Yes, you'll get the classic Tom Petty stuff live, but you're also going to get a lot of different songs, a lot of cover tunes that we really haven't heard before. So that's the real reason why I'm intrigued by this. Now, am I going to buy the 2 CD version? Am I going to buy the full CD set? I don't know. If you haven't heard, we're in a recession, lots of inflation. Might not be in the budget, but this does intrigue me. So I'll definitely be listening to it on Black Friday when it comes out on Spotify. Now, this one, as much as I love Wolfgang Van Halen, you guys know I am a Van Halen fanatic. This bothers me. This bothers me a lot. This seems like a money grab, and it seems like a very early, sorry, Wolfie, pathetic money grab. We're already getting a reissue, expanded edition of Mammoth WVH. Before we even get a second album, we're getting a reissue of the first album coming out November the 11th with 3 new songs in terms of the US release. We're getting Talk and Walk, which was on the Japanese version of Mammoth WVH. Plus, we're getting As Long as You're Not You and Goodbye. To me, this bothers me. This upsets me greatly. You couldn't take these songs and put them on a new album and just release them on the second album. You've got to try the money grab thing, which I've already told you here over and over again on this episode. I am not a fan of, and I do not like having bad feelings about anybody in the Van Halen family. But this does not make me feel very good about Wolfgang Van Halen. I'm not going out and buying an album I already own that I just bought within the last 2 years for 3 new songs. I find this to be a very Bush League move on Wolfie's part. That being said, we'll review Talk and Walk since it's been officially released as a single now, coming up in the next couple weeks on the Fortress. All right, this coming Tuesday, September the 27th, is the second Taylor Hawkins tribute concert, this time in Los Angeles, California. Be interesting to see what changes from the London show, what kind of stays the same. Rumors, of course, tying back into Wolfgang Van Halen about who will be the singer if Wolfie decides to do classic Van Halen again like he did overseas. Taylor Hawkins, of course, this tribute show for the deceased Foo Fighters drummer, Justin Hawkins, took over vocals on the 2 Van Halen songs that Wolfie played guitar on, Hot for Teacher and On Fire. Now, I'm hearing speculation, rumblings, and rumors, and I hope this is the case, that we might get Sebastian Bach, formerly of Skid Row, singing some classic Van Halen. Not confirmed, only speculation. Then there's really crazy rumors out there that we could see David Lee Roth make a surprise appearance, or even Sammy Hagar. I would believe the Sebastian Bach rumors more. I have not received any kind of confirmation that, like the London show, this second tribute show will be streamed on Paramount Plus. I'm thinking it only makes logical sense. If they covered the first one, why wouldn't they cover the second one? But again, I have not seen anything concrete about that yet. That being said, if you want to watch it, check out, if you've got Paramount Plus, make sure Tuesday evening, just log in, see if it's there, prepare, set your 3-4 hours aside in case it does pop up. There's no football, nothing else going on. Unless, of course, you've got work, family, kids. You know, the inconsequential things in life. New music releases. Smashing Pumpkins. Never been a huge fan, but I have to give Billy Corgan and crew credit. He is very prolific, and he is always writing and trying to put new music out. We are going to get a 33-song, 3-act project. Basically sounds like it's going to be broke up into 3 11-song acts, or as you and I would call them, albums. The project in its entirety is called Autumn, but it's spelled A-T-U-M. Recently saw an interview just a few days ago with Billy Corgan, Didn't talk much about the new project, but just a very general discussion about his life before the Smashing Pumpkins and as leader of the band. And Billy Corgan, number one, he's a Cubs fan, so he can't be all bad. Number two, sounds like a very intelligent, well-spoken guy. There have been stories throughout the years, as there has been with any other major rock star, about outbursts, bad behavior. And he's quirky. We know that. The guy runs NWA, a major wrestling promotion. But anybody who can speak in this day and age anymore, anybody who can speak without having to always resort to, that was super cool. Billy Corgan sounds like he's about 99.9% more intelligent than the normal celebrity. So we might have to check that out here in the coming months on the Fortress. Also want to mention he's releasing all this music in a unique way. I believe he's starting a podcast, or he's guest hosting a podcast, and he is going to release one song a week on said podcast. Very intriguing way to release new music. Of course, we've been talking about Wolfgang Van Halen here. The Red Hot Chili Peppers just released their Eddie Van Halen tribute song called Eddie. I have made no bones about the fact that I have become bored with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They've kind of lost their edge for me. But even in their heyday, back in the 90s and the 2000s, they weren't my favorite. I've listened to Eddie once so far. I'll reserve judgment for a week or two, and then I'll give you a full review in the breakdown segment. The thing I like about it is that, for the most part, the Chili Peppers stick to their style. They're not trying to create some kind of a Van Halen song cloaked in a Red Hot Chili Peppers vibe, except for John Frusciante's guitar at the end. Sounds like at times he is trying to emulate Eddie. Now, is he doing it offensively? No. It's obvious, but it's not egregiously offensive. Let's put it that way. So again, I need a couple more spins, a couple more listens, and then I will give you a full review in the next week or two. Journey, what a mess. What a mess Neil Schon has created with this band. Him and Jonathan Cain. We heard all the stories. We thought Steve Perry was an egomaniac, just like with Foreigner, where we heard all the stories about Lou Gramm was an egomaniac. It's always the lead singer, David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar. The lead singer is always the egomaniac, and the rest of the band, the poor, suffering drummer, guitar player, bass player, are always abused and used by the lead singer for the most part. There were legal problems in Journey a few years back that eventually led to the firing of longtime classic lineup drummer Steve Smith, classic lineup bass player Ross Valerie. The legal issues are not over for Journey now, as Steve Perry has swooped in and now he is suing Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain over trademark registration issues. Now, this involves Schon and Cain wanting to merchandise certain Journey songs, put them on hats, t-shirts, jackets. There's 20 songs, to my understanding, involved in the lawsuit. Now, Schon and Cain have sold, this is where it gets really into the legal muck. So I'm going to have to ask you to do more research on this if you're interested in finding out what's going on behind the scenes with Journey. But Schon and Cain have both sold their songwriting rights away. And we talked about this a lot, especially late last year, where a lot of major acts, Springsteen, Dylan, were selling off their songwriting for huge sums of money, hundreds of millions of dollars. Motley Crue, another one that comes to mind. I'm assuming that they were able to keep the rights for the band logo, the band name, the song, merchandising rights. That's where this gets really tricky. As Steve Perry comes in and says, you don't have the right to take these songs that I sang on and start putting them on coffee mugs and whatever merchandising venture you want to use. Don't stop believing, whatever it might be. So stay tuned. Of course, we will follow up when we find out more. Couple of somber notes here to wrap up News of the World. First off, one of my favorite bands. Yes, I seem to always mention my 10 or 12 favorite bands ad nauseum on this podcast, but why wouldn't I? I'm the host. Deal with it. Night Ranger, original guitarist. Of course, Night Ranger was known for the dual guitar attack of Brad Gillis and Jeff Watson. Now, Brad Gillis is still a member. Jeff Watson dropped out a while back. Jeff Watson is unfortunately now recovering from brain surgery. So far, the news is good. He got through it, able to communicate, talk, of course, post updates on his status. So here at the Fortress, we wish nothing but the best for Jeff Watson. And then finally, a moment of silence for former Doobie Brothers drummer John Hartman, who passed away recently. The band acknowledging it on social media. And anytime a classic rocker is fallen, we will always pay tribute here on the Fortress. So rest in peace, John Hartman, and thoughts and prayers to your friends and your family members that you left behind. And that'll do it for News of the World. Next up, Breakdown. We're reviewing Stone Temple Pilots, Everclear, and the Dirty Hooks live in concert, along with new single from Bush, a compare and contrast with Sammy Hagar and the Circle. You want to hear about that. And an alternate remix version of one of the greatest rock songs of all time. You don't want to miss Breakdown. I'll be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment one, The News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock. I'm the Maestro Kevin Crane, episode 58, September the 23rd, 2022. It is time for the breakdown segment. The heart, the guts, the soul of each and every episode, where we look at new music, new albums, new singles, and of course, we review concerts. And that's what we're going to do up front here. Last Friday night, I had to record the Fortress a bit early because I was going to see this show that we're going to review right now. Stone Temple Pilots, Everclear, and the Dirty Hooks. Four Winds Field, South Bend, Indiana. Been there before to see concerts. Not a bad venue. Outdoors, of course. Baseball stadium. Usually have one or two shows there a year. And after the problems with the sound at the August show, the stadium tour with Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Poison, and Joan Jett, I'm telling you, these bands have got to figure out a way to adjust their sound mix for indoor shows versus outdoor shows, because the sound on the outdoor shows just tends to be so much better. You're not getting the echoing, the bouncing off the stadium roof, the arena roof. Now, that being said, the concert as a whole was a mixed bag. First up, of course, was the Dirty Hooks. They played for half an hour. Didn't know anything about them. Didn't go in. I didn't listen to any of their music ahead of time. Female drummer, black hair. So, of course, first thing that pops into my head is the White Stripes. So maybe I was a little tainted by that, a little biased, but some of their music to me did sound a little bit like the White Stripes, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I thought the Dirty Hooks were pretty good. I actually think they were one of the better opening acts I've seen. I will definitely, when I get time, in between all the other new music and classic stuff that I listen to day in and day out, I will definitely try to listen to some more of the Dirty Hooks. Always a positive experience, always good to get the opening act out there and have them be enjoyable. Then we get Everclear. And now we talked about Everclear last year because I saw them live on the Summerland tour with Living Colour, Hoobastank, and Wheatus. And unfortunately, this was more of the same from Everclear. 2022, they're not much different from what they were in 2021. They are a lot different from the first time I saw them way, way back. Late 90s, early 2000s, opening for Matchbox 20. a lot more energy. There are health issues involved, of course, with their frontman, Art Alexakis. He's got multiple sclerosis. His voice is ragged. It is ragged. I don't think he was ever considered the greatest singer in the world to begin with. The years on the road, the MS have probably taken their toll on him. He tries. Nobody's going to give him anything but an A for effort, but in terms of execution, they're just not that good anymore. I'm sorry. They're just not. I found myself, all I cared about was waiting for Santa Monica. That's the only song of theirs I really wanted to hear. There are a couple other ones that I really like. The entire album, Sparkle and Fade, I love Sparkle and Fade. That whole album, fantastic. But I was never a fan after that. I never got into a lot of the more poppy stuff they put out after that. So much for the Afterglow. And then, of course, you got AM radio and Father of Mine. They don't do much for me. So in the end, Everclear wasn't all that great. Again, just like last year on the Summerland tour. Then we get to Stone Temple Pilots. Never got to see them with Scott Weiland, unfortunately. This is the second time I've seen them now in their current incarnation. Love them. I saw them at a festival around here that they used to throw once a year in the summer called the Big Growl. Saw them with my daughter. We're both huge STP fans. And they were great back then. I think they were even better on this night, September the 16th. They were better. Part of the reason why I can tell you, very easy for me. When I saw them the first time, which would have been, I want to say 2019, it was pre-pandemic, they played Plush, one of my favorite songs of all time. I mean, top 10. That's how much I love this song. They did the acoustic half. The first half was acoustic. And I know the acoustic version of Plush was a massive hit based on their appearance on MTV Unplugged. So when I saw them in 2019, they did the first half acoustically and then got into the normal electric version in the second half. This time around, I got the full force, the way it should be played with Plush. So I was much happier with that this time around than the first concert. I don't know, also the night, the lighting was more in full effect. When I saw them the first time, it was the middle of summer, so the sun didn't set until late. So there was not a lot of lighting going on there. This time around, again, it helped give the show a little bit of a different feel, a little bit more intensity. 14 song set, about an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes after an hour of Everclear. I'll run down the set list for you real quick, stopping only at the points that stand out. Opener was Wicked Garden, Vaseline, Big Bang Baby, Down, very underrated song in my opinion. Very, very underrated song. Then we got the one song that they played this time around off their last full-length studio album, kind of known as the Butterfly album, with their current lead singer. Then we got the one deep track that I didn't need. And I know they like to play this song. They love it. Silver Gun Superman isn't my favorite STP deep track. When you consider the fact that they didn't play Creep on this particular night, that kind of was a head scratcher for me. Creep would have been much better in this slot. Then, of course, you get Big Empty, Plush, as we discussed, Interstate Love Song, and the intense Cracker Man. And then you follow that up with Dead and Bloated, so you're in the really, really hard and heavy part of the show. And then they closed out the quote-unquote regular set with Tripping on a Hole in a Paper Heart. They came back out for a 2-song encore. 2 songs off of their phenomenal debut album, Core, Piece of Pie. That deep track I love. They can keep playing that one forever. As opposed to Silver Gun Superman, Piece of Pie, great, great song. Awesome deep track. Keep playing it, guys. And then finally, of course, they close out with Sex Type Thing. So like I said, overall, to wrap things up, if you want me to judge the show as a whole, good but not great because of the soft middle with Everclear. But if you want me to just judge the Stone Temple Pilots show, phenomenal. Phenomenal show, better than the last time, and the last time was pretty damn good. So if you get a chance, check out the current incarnation of Stone Temple Pilots in concert. All right. Some new songs, some remix songs for you. Kind of a mixed bag here this week as we look at our songs of the week to review. So first off, let's start with Bush. Second single off of their upcoming album, The Art of Survival. Song is called Heavy is the Ocean. And this is pretty heavy. It's a very, very fitting title. I'm not trying to say this in a bad way, but this song is like a lumbering Godzilla of a song. You just got to listen to it to understand what I'm saying. It is heavy. Not like heavy metal heavy. Don't get me wrong. You're not getting speed metal pacing. You're not getting ridiculous guitar solos, but it's just very bottom heavy in terms of its sound. Is it a bad song? No. Is it a great song? No. It's somewhere in the middle. Good but not great. I'll take it for the second single, especially since More Than Machines, the first single, was so good. Still have positive feelings about the upcoming album, which we're just a few weeks away from, by the way. Coming out on October the 7th is The Art of Survival. Now let's move to something I wouldn't normally review, but because it's a band I adore, admire, and love beyond all belief, with a legendary guitar player thrown in the mix. It's called the 2022 Rock in Rio remix of one of the classic rock songs of all time, Cult of Personality. Yes, we're talking about Living Colour along with guitar from Steve Vai. Now, is it really that much different from the original? No. The guys in Living Color are too damn smart to really ever mess with Cult of Personality, knowing that that was magic. Now, bringing in Steve Vai to add some guitar to it could have been a bad thing. Again, do you really want to mess with something so perfect as the song Cult of Personality? Luckily, Steve Vai's contributions don't really overwhelm or take away from the song. They do add a little bit to it. Again, though, as I just said, Living Color, those guys are too smart to alter or change that kind of a song to any kind of an extreme. So it's not that much different from the original version, but at the same time, it's just different enough where it's intriguing to a fanatic like me. I think it's great. I think it's really solid. I think it's worth listening to, especially if you love the original or you love Living Color, or even if you're a Steve Vai fan. All right, finally here on Breakdown, something that I don't know if we'll ever do again. A double review of the same song. The third single from Sammy Hagar and the Circle's upcoming Crazy Times album is Funky Feng Shui. Now, the intriguing thing about Funky Feng Shui is that they had already released a version of this on their brief, dare I say, money grab, Lockdown 2020 album. And I feel bad. I'm ripping on my guys from Van Halen. I've ripped into Wolfgang Van Halen already for the 3 new songs he's tacking on to the Mammoth WVH reissue, money grab. And then I look back at the Lockdown 2020 album that Sammy Hagar and the Circle put out when, of course, they were separated due to COVID. But you look at it, barely 30 minutes, if that. Snippets of cover songs, not even really full cover songs. And then they added Funky Feng Shui, a 1:13 song idea, I guess you could call it. Could you even really call it a full song? But it was intriguing. It was very cool for the 1:13 taste that we got of it. So then news comes out that there's a, dare I say, expanded version of Funky Feng Shui on Crazy Times. So how about this for an expanded version? Funky Feng Shui goes from the 1:13 Lockdown 2020 version to an epic 2:17 version coming up on Crazy Times. Frustration times 2 for me, because there is a great song idea in here somewhere, and Sammy just can't flesh it out to the point where it's a normal 3.5, 4-minute long song. And I know there's old school rock and rollers out there who are thinking, hey, hit singles back in the 50s and 60s barely got to 3 minutes, if that. And I get it. I get it. But comparing and contrasting the two versions of Funky Feng Shui. That's what we're going to do here in the last couple minutes of our breakdown segment. The lyrical change in the chorus bothers me. I don't know why Sammy thought he had to change the chorus. In the original version on Lockdown 2020, he sings, "That's some funky feng shui." Now in the new version on Crazy Times, he says, "Now that's a funky, funky thing." It seems like lyrically that's backtracking to me. Funky feng shui is very creative, very cool flow to it. I wish he'd stuck with the original chorus from the Lockdown version instead of making it more bland and generic with the Crazy Times version. Musically, they're almost identical, stretched out obviously a little bit on Crazy Times. Obviously, a little bit more musically, a little bit more music interplay between the bandmates tacked on here on the newer version. I still, honestly, even though it's only a minute and 13 seconds, really like the Lockdown 2020 version a lot more. I'm not saying the Crazy Times version is bad. I've already said there's a great song idea in there. Doesn't matter what version we're talking about, but it never gets fully formed either way. And of course, a week from today, as this podcast hits on September the 23rd, Crazy Times will finally be out. That review will be coming in a couple weeks here on The Fortress, that full album review. And of course, you're already listening to me, but if there's another platform that you prefer to listen to your podcasts on, and you just stumbled upon us, please keep in mind all of the platforms, the podcast hosts that you can listen to us on, including Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and Audible. And also, don't forget to check out our Facebook page, New Music Sunday, where we post a YouTube video each and every Sunday featuring a brand new song from one of the artists that we talk about here on The Fortress. Every Friday afternoon, we post the Weekend Rock Project, a new one every Friday afternoon. Kind of a way for you guys to get more involved. We'll give you a theme when it comes to songs, a word, an idea. You guys throw out there the songs that you know and love that would fit into that word or that idea or that theme. That's every Friday afternoon with the Weekend Rock Project. I just posted the one for this week. The theme for this weekend is driving songs with some variation of the word drive in them, and we'll explain why I chose that particular idea in the I Want to Go Back segment coming up in just a few minutes. Of course, our look back at classic album releases, anniversaries of major moments in rock history, and of course, birthdays of some of the greats in rock and roll history. So we'll get you through a quick promo here, take a break, and I will be right back with I Want to Go Back. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music In our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Wanna Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, it's time to climb into the Fortress of Rock DeLorean. Set the engine to 1.21 gigawatts and head back in time to look back at birthdays, anniversaries, classic moments in rock and roll history. Yes, it is time for I Want to Go Back in tribute to Eddie Money, the late, great Eddie Money. And as always in this segment, I want to give credit to some of the places where I find the ideas for a lot of the stories here on the Fortress of Rock each and every week. Now, I get the ideas from these websites, but the opinions, of course, are mine and mine alone. Be sure to check out ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and, of course, the Van Halen News Desk. Let's start off with birthdays. Only 2 of them for September the 23rd, but they are big ones. We're going to go all the way back in the DeLorean to 1930, September the 23rd. Real quick shout out. He's a legend. We all know it. I can't speak to his musical greatness because honestly, it was before my time. It's not really rock and roll per se, but we all know his influence, his legacy. The great Ray Charles was born on September the 23rd, 1930. Now, this other birthday, I do have a little bit to discuss when it comes to this man. Some good, some bad. Some of these things I brought up in the past on the podcast. September the 23rd, 1949. 73 years old today. The boss, Bruce Springsteen. Happy birthday to the boss. You guys know a lot of the time on this podcast in the past, any news story that comes up involving Bruce Springsteen, I usually find a way to spin it in a negative light because we've had the Ticketmaster fiasco most recently and the silence and naivete that has come out of the Springsteen camp about the dynamic pricing, or as I like to call it, price gouging that Ticketmaster perpetrated on Bruce Springsteen fans when tickets for his upcoming 2023 U.S. tour went on sale. It's just another point to prove to myself, if not to you guys out there, that Bruce Springsteen is, in a lot of ways, what is wrong with rock and roll celebrities and celebrities in general. They're not your friend. They don't care about you, and they will take advantage of you each and every step of the way that they can. Yes, I'm back to being Mr. Cynical. But I've read a lot of biographical material about Bruce Springsteen, especially when it came to the Born in the USA era and how that was all manufactured, misunderstood. So not all of it was his fault, but there was a conscious effort by him and his camp. John Landau was involved to create this, I don't want to say patriotic icon, but to create this American rock and roll god, basically, with that album. This was not the street smart, leather clad young rebel that we saw adorning the cover of Born to Run with his band or Darkness on the Edge of Town. But this was the culmination. Born in the USA was the culmination of a very commercially driven attempt to create a certain persona, a certain icon. It wasn't as organic as people might think. And of course, there's a little bit of that. It doesn't matter who you're talking about. The image is manufactured, the image is thought out, the image is planned. But it's a little more hypocritical in Bruce Springsteen's case because this isn't like a Motley Crue putting on the makeup or Kiss. Poison. This is somebody who tried to portray themselves as an everyday working man. And almost compare him to his new best buddy, John Cougar Mellencamp, who unfortunately, in the same way, has become very much of a cynical, negative persona in the rock world, in my opinion. Not for the same reasons. But I don't believe John Cougar Mellencamp's turn into a more serious musical artist in the Scarecrow era was so much thought out and planned as it was for Bruce Springsteen. So in the end, I think Bruce Springsteen, in a way, is a phony. Is he one of the greatest songwriters of all time? Absolutely. Is he an underrated guitar player? Absolutely. And I will judge him on those merits and those merits alone when it comes to considering him one of the greatest rock and roll stars of all time. But that doesn't mean I have to like him as a person or his phoniness when he's not on stage. Special treatment he got when he was arrested or detained for drinking on a motorcycle in a park in New Jersey. You or me or anybody else caught doing that, we're in jail. We're done. We're done. License suspended or revoked. But of course, it's Bruce Springsteen. Oh my goodness, we can't do anything to the boss. We can't do anything to him. And then, of course, the way he handled it was pathetic. He sounded like a pampered Hollywood icon. Do you know who I am? He joked about it at shows, at appearances. Drunk driving is not a joke. It is a serious, serious issue. You ask any parent who's lost a child to drunk driving, whether they were behind the wheel or behind the wheel of another car that was involved in an accident involving a drunk driver. Yet somehow we still joke about it. And it's even worse when it comes to marijuana. I see public service commercials that are so joking about, well, if you're high, you really shouldn't drive. Ha 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 ha. Take it seriously. And I wish Bruce Springsteen would have taken it seriously, but again, he acts like he's a pampered celebrity. And again, it diminishes to me his legend. And it's a shame because I do admire his music and I do admire his live performances and his track record when it comes to fantastic albums. Happy birthday to the boss. Hey, Bruce, how about you got enough money? How about you get an Uber to drive you around while you do some birthday shots, okay? Don't hop on the motorcycle. All right, the DeLorean now brings us up from 1949 to 1969 for our anniversaries of classic moments in rock history. September the 23rd, 1969, of course, this was the day. And I'll let you guys do the research. It's a fascinating story. I can't do it justice here. We've heard about the backwards records the Beatles put out saying Paul is dead. But today was the day, back in 1969, when those Paul McCartney death rumors began. Began in Illinois at a college newspaper, I believe. Story came out that Paul was dead and had been dead since 1966. Died in a car crash, and a replacement, a look-alike, had been filling in for him since then. Only in America. I know the Beatles are British, but of course this rumor started here in the good old US of A, where conspiracies and paranoia will never die. And neither will Paul McCartney, hopefully. All right, let's travel up to 1977, September the 23rd. David Bowie releases Heroes as a single. Of course, Heroes became one of his most iconic songs, covered by multiple, dare I say, dozens of different artists. I don't think I'm overreaching on that. 1980, September the 23rd. I'll give you a disclaimer here. I'm not a huge fan of Bob Marley. I don't like what he represented with the whole pot smoking, reggae, hippy dippy crap. Again, I recognize his place in music history. I believe they're doing a biopic about him coming up sometime in the next year or two. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on this date in 1980, Bob Marley had his last performance on stage. He actually collapsed on stage in Pittsburgh, September the 23rd, 1980. A few days earlier, he had collapsed in New York City, had been told not to go back out on his current tour. He did anyway, collapsed again, and that was it for him in terms of touring. And unfortunately, in 1981, Bob Marley died of cancer. September the 23rd, 1982. Not going to spend a lot of time on this because we did talk about it a few weeks back in reference to the first single off of this album. The single was Pressure from Billy Joel. The 40-year anniversary today of the release of the album Pressure came off of the Nylon Curtain, September the 23rd, 1982. Now, the Nylon Curtain, even though to me Billy Joel was always a more serious artist than he was really ever given credit for. People like to point to Just the Way You Are, his first big hit. But come on, if you know anything about Billy Joel's music, you take away the stuff from An Innocent Man, A Departure That I Never Liked. Billy Joel was a very strong and very, for the most part, serious songwriter, addressing a lot of darker topics. And the Nylon Curtain was really the album that showcased that finally told people, you know, it's not just good time Billy here singing about how it's still rock and roll to me. Again, the aforementioned single Pressure, along with Allentown. Ironically, given what we're going through right now in this day and age, 40 years later, a bleak look at a dying American city. And then, of course, Goodnight Saigon, a look back at the awful, tragic results of the Vietnam War. And I think the best thing you can say about the Nylon Curtain is the fact that it really didn't distract one way or the other from Billy Joel's career before that and after that. I mentioned John Cougar Mellencamp and I mentioned Scarecrow. I look at the Nylon Curtain kind of the same way that I look at Scarecrow, in that Scarecrow was the album that made people stand up and take notice of John Cougar Mellencamp as a serious singer and songwriter, but it didn't diminish some of the lighter stuff he'd done beforehand, and it didn't diminish what came after. It was just a touchstone moment in his career, just like the Nylon Curtain was for Billy Joel. Now, I think the one difference you can draw from them is that you look at Scarecrow in Mellencamp's career, and you can still, a lot of people will still point to it as his greatest album. Hard to argue with that. I could make a case for a couple other albums in his discography, but it would be really hard to go against Scarecrow. Whereas with Billy Joel, as good as the Nylon Curtain was, I'm always going to make a case for The Stranger, or I'm going to make a case for Glass Houses or 52nd Street ahead of the Nylon Curtain. But again, that doesn't mean the Nylon Curtain is a bad album. No way, no how. All right, for our last little trip here in the DeLorean, we're going to move up to 1992, and we're going to cheat a little bit. Instead of focusing on today, September the 23rd, we're going to go back a couple days. We're going to go back to September the 21st of 1992, the 30-year anniversary of R.E.M. releasing the song Drive as a single off the album Automatic for the People. This is where I came up with the weekend rock project that I mentioned in the last segment. This is an interesting moment in rock history for me because R.E.M. started, in my opinion, to lose steam at this time. After great album after great album after great album that they had put out, Automatic for the People was maybe the first one where I kind of went, it's okay. It's good. It's not great. It's not a classic. Drive is a fine song, but it is not in any way, shape, or form to me an R.E.M. classic. And again, this is kind of a benchmark moment for the band because Automatic for the People, in my opinion, wasn't all that great. It sold fine. It charted very well. And then the following album, Monster, to me was the last great hurrah for R.E.M. That to me was really their last truly great album. And then, of course, they signed their mega deal with Warner Brothers, I want to say. And they released their last 5 albums through Warner Brothers. And most of that music, most of that output was god-awful boring. Now, the one exception that pops into my head, I believe, is their second to last album, Accelerate, which I thought was a little bit more like old school classic R.E.M., much more listenable than the boring, droning stuff they put out once they signed that big contract with Warner Brothers. And I just look at Drive, and the release of Drive as a single 30 years ago from Automatic for the People, and I look at it as that moment where R.E.M. kind of lost their mojo. And it's a shame because when they were great, they were great. And we all know it's so hard for your favorite band, for my favorite band to sustain momentum album after album, decade after decade. And it is the rare feat for a band that can do that. And we'll have that discussion at another time. We'll talk about some of the bands that I personally think have been able to do it, some of the classic rock bands that have been able to do it. But again, that's a topic for another day. That's it for I Want to Go Back. Of course, one last segment to come up here where I'm going to give you a preview of what I'm going to be talking about here on the Fortress through the end of September into October. So hang out with me for just a couple more minutes, kids. I will be right back. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. Hey, everybody. Hope you're enjoying your Friday evening here with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. September the 23rd, 2022, episode 58 of the Fortress of Rock. Let's take a quick look at what we're going to be reviewing here over the next 3 or 4 weeks. Concert-wise, nothing in the immediate future, but a couple shows coming in October. Roger Clyne and the Peacemakers down in Indianapolis, small club down there. That review will be coming mid-October. Week or two after that, Judas Priest and Queensryche in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So we'll have a couple concerts review in October for you. As far as albums go, going to be busy. Lots of new stuff coming out here all through the month of October and a few here in late September. Next week, we will review the Lost album from the Smithereens. Very underrated band. Yes, they had a few hits, but I still don't think people give them credit. They were a great, great rock and roll band. An album that fell through the cracks for them in between record deals, finally coming to light, released today. So we'll review that next Friday for you here on The Fortress, as well as Billy Idol's new EP, 4 songs, The Cage. We'll review that for you next week as well. Being released next Friday, September the 30th. We've been waiting for it. We've talked about it and talked about it. Sammy Hagar and the Circle. Crazy Times. We will have a review of that for you. It's looking like October the 7th. And then on October the 7th, 3 albums coming out. New albums from Bush. We talked about that earlier in this episode. The Art of Survival. The Cult, Under the Midnight Sun. And the new Queensryche album. All come out October the 7th. We will review all 3 of them at some point. I definitely have to start getting into the new Queensryche, as I mentioned, since I'll be going to see them in concert. Week and a half, 2 weeks after the release of the album, I want to make sure I know the new stuff. Still a shame that Jeff Tate can't reconcile with the band. Just not the same. It's just not the same. In terms of songs, since we're going to have a full album and an EP next week in our breakdown segment, I don't know how many, if any, of these we're going to get to, and I'm sure more will pop up. We mentioned the Red Hot Chili Peppers tribute song to Eddie Van Halen, Eddie. We mentioned the Smashing Pumpkins, their 33-song, 3-act Autumn. 1 song a week is my understanding. We're not going to review one Smashing Pumpkins song every week here on The Fortress, but we will listen to the very first single, Beguiled, here in the next week or two. And then finally, the 3rd release off the new Skid Row album, The Gang's All Here, Time Bomb, just came out. We will definitely be looking into that one here within the next few weeks on The Fortress of Rock. Of course, as I mentioned, there's going to be other stuff that pops up. We've got Alter Bridge coming up. We've got the new Skid Row album coming up. There's going to be a lot of new music to to discuss, to talk about, to break down, so you do not want to miss any of our reviews, any of our podcast episodes. Maybe you'll get some helpful hints for your Christmas shopping. I'll let you know what albums to buy for your friends and what albums to stay away from. That's what we do here. I like to think of it as a public service. No, actually, it's a vanity project. I love talking to you guys about music. It's fun for me. I hope it's fun for you. And unfortunately, fun times come to a close once again here this week. That'll do it for the Fortress. I hope you guys have a great, safe weekend, and I hope somewhere where you are, the sun is shining. Because as I mentioned at the top of the episode, doesn't look like we're going to be getting sun here for the next 6 months. That's how it feels. But regardless of whether the sun peeks through the clouds or not, the Fortress will always be here for you every Friday night. Have fun, kids. Listen to some great rock and roll this week. Take care. I will talk to you next Friday night.